Good morning, board, staff, and members of the public. After my statement, the chairman will open this meeting and explain the rules for this electronic meeting. Please keep your microphone on mute when you are not speaking. The technical support team may proactively mute participants if the microphone is picking up background noise. Board members should check to make sure the microphone is not muted before speaking. You may text me at 540-336-3948 at any time during the meeting if you need technical support, and an IT tech will call your cell phone to assist. I now turn the meeting over to the committee chairman.
Yeah, have to remember to unmute before speaking. So I'll read the provided statement. In accordance with the Governor's State of Emergency Declaration and executive orders regarding COVID-19 pandemic, the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors Continuity Ordinance, General Assembly 2020 Budget Amendments 28 and number 137. Loudoun Water will meet today in an electronic meeting in compliance with these special procedures. Only action items necessary to continue operations of Loudoun Water and discharge and the discharge of all its lawful purposes, duties, responsibilities will be discussed during today's meeting. Reports and other meeting information are available on board docs. Public notice of the meeting access information was provided on the Loudoun Water website. A recording of the meeting will be available in board docs at the following link. Board members wishing to speak are reminded to press unmute and identify themselves by name so the staff can accurately capture comments. All items will be recommended to the to the next Loudoun Water board meeting. The board secretary will now take roll call in attendance for all the committee members.
Thank you. Mr. Bonfils?
Here.
Mr. Allen?
Here.
Mr. Campbell?
Here.
Mr. Sultan?
Here.
All right, all committee members are present, sir. Thank you.
Jill, this is Angeline. I'm present.
Thank you, Angeline.
Great, Angeline.
Appreciate that. I also acknowledge that Mark Koblis is attending as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Right. So the next item is the approval of the agenda. If everybody's reviewed the agenda for today, could I have a motion to approve the agenda?
This is Terry. I approve.
Second by Marty.
Any
And
discussion?
roll call. Oh, sorry.
Okay. That's any discussion, no discussion. So roll call, please. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Bonfils?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
And Mr. Sultan?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Unanimous, sir.
Thank you very much. There are no action items on the agenda today. So we do have an informational item, which is one of the main purposes of this meeting. And then, so let's move into that item. And let's see, I believe Mark and Dale are going to lead this.
Mr. Bonfils, this is Carla. Good morning, everybody. So actually, Elton Eccles and Stefan Haas, as well as Dale, are going to walk us through this presentation. I just wanted to say a couple things before we get started. So today's agenda, of course, is based on the feedback we got from all of you at the last meeting, and we appreciate that. We do know that we are going to cover some background information, some overview information, and for many of you, you've heard that, and you've heard it multiple times, but we do think it's important to hit on those things to set up the discussion for additional topics. And so, you know, we'll go through those fairly quickly, but we think it's important to always keep those fresh in our mind. I did want to acknowledge that Stefan and Elton really did quite an amazing job of pulling this presentation together. A lot of information, and they did it in a fairly short amount of time. And we also have Dale here, and he has graciously agreed to lead us through the discussion on the costs. And so we're looking forward to that. And then finally, after the presentation, after discussion, we want to get some feedback from you on the meeting agenda for our next meeting, which is in 2 weeks. And so with that, I will turn it over to Elton to start the presentation.
Thanks, Carla. Good morning, Chairman Bonfils and members of the committee. Happy to be here again today for our second meeting. I want to be brief, but I do want to take a few moments to introduce today's discussion about Reservoir Park. And so our agenda is going to cover just a few topics, so we have plenty of time. We're going to look at the overview of the project, spend a bit of time talking about the budget, as I know that's important to us today. And then we're going to talk about a proposed work plan for the committee going forward that will help align with the project critical path and keep us in sync so that we can continue to report back to the full board and stay in tune with the project. So in terms of background, when I tell the story of Reservoir Park, there are a few real key points that I like to make. And first, that's Nova Parks has been with us just about every step of the way. I think some of you may recall in 2014, after the closure of the reservoir, they helped us return recreation to the facility Memorial Day of 2015. And I just wanted to say on a personal note, at that point in time, I was spending a good deal of time making frequent site visits to the reservoir because we were in the design process for the dam reconstruction. And I can say that I truly saw a night and day difference in the atmosphere at the reservoir. There was an established set of rules, a greater presence by what, Nova Parks was essentially serving in a caretaker role, and there was less loitering, vandalism, trash, and the park visitors just seemed very pleased with what was going on in the partnership. And that partnership quickly grew, and Nova Parks shared our vision for this nexus of a passive recreation park type facility with our desire to have stewardship of the water resources and education. So as things materialized, as Nova Parks, as things materialized with the project, they made an earnest financial contribution as well as numerous easements that are of very great value to Loudoun Water. And I think that's something that Dale's going to touch on again here in a few moments. But next we set out on this strategic concept plan development, again, closely partnering with Nova Parks. And so this led to a series of workshops and public input sessions. And what we heard was the stakeholders emphasizing the maintaining of the serene character out there, this tucked away gem in the center of suburbia. And so it was one workshop in particular, the Beaver Dam Open House that was held in the fall of 2015, that this was really an inflection point in the Reservoir Park development process. And, I kind of, the cliche, a picture's worth 1,000 words, here's one that really captured that evening. Incredibly well attended. Members of the public and interest groups were openly talking about everything. There was great emphasis on the public participation, really the input that we saw there, we've tried to take and action that in the development process that we've gone through so far. And wait a second, let's not miss out and see that our fearless committee chair there, Mr. Bonfils, has been hard at work on this park all along the way, even going back to that night in 2015. So that's really for me and I think I'm representing the rest of the group here, the background for this project is. And so I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Stefan for a moment to kind of take us into the next steps of talking about the budget portion of the project.
Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone can hear me okay. Get this to go to the next slide. I can jump in about talking about where we are now in the project. There we go. All right. So just to give a quick overview about where we are now. So we have just completed our design development. So I guess in layman's terms, we're about 60% of the way done with the design of the project. We're getting ahead into our construction documentation now, and I think the next slide will go over that a little bit more. About a month and a half ago, we have confirmed the architectural style with the butterfly roof, although there are still some things to be determined. We have colors, finishes, some materials, maybe some ways to make the shelters and buildings a little more traditional. Those things still need to be, hashed out and vetted, and that's something we can hope to bring you in the subsequent meetings. We're also, we've confirmed location of structures, footprints, layouts, things like that. And we are in the site plan process with the county. We've made our first submission, received comments back, nothing too crazy or groundbreaking. There are some things we'll have to work through with the county. But we're going to require additional submissions, 2, 3. It depends on how the next submission goes to really get a good idea of what that looks like. But I have a schedule on the following slides. I can show that a little better. Before I go into that, though, I just wanted to hit on some of the remaining milestones. As I mentioned, we have the construction documentation phase. That's really where we're trying to take these 60% design, where we have the building footprints and layouts, things like that, and really start adding detail to them, understanding materials, finishes, colors, things of that nature, and get us to a point where we can, bid the project. As I mentioned earlier, we're going through the site plan process with the county. We also have 2 additional cost estimates remaining. We have 2 deliverables through our construction documentation phase where we'll be receiving cost estimates to help, maintain the cost, so to say. This project, we're going to have a multitude of local and state permits we're going to have to obtain. So that's going to be a bigger chunk of the project. And after that, we're just going to go through the bid phase process, bring it to the CIP committee and board for approval, and then we'll have to look to develop the management plan with Nova Parks. And just to give a visual of this, this is just a high-level schedule of the project. I'll be jumping back to this at the end of the presentation to discuss, some possible committee interactions with it. But we have sort of two paths we have to focus on. One up top is the design path of the project, and then the bottom path is the permitting. As you can tell, we have the construction documentation phase going on. At 50% construction documents, we'll be looking at a cost estimate completed. That'll be sometime early 2021. Based on that cost estimate, we'll be looking to move into sort of the final design of the project. That should take 3-4 months or so. And then at the end, the final deliverable will also be getting another cost estimate to see where we're at there. In parallel with that process, we will be obviously going through a site plan process with the county. And then once we think we have enough definition in our project, we're going to start that permit phase. Obviously the early we can start, the better, but that's something we're going to have to coordinate with our civil engineer and see how they feel. And then once we get all the permits and we're comfortable with where the design's at, we'll look to bid, award, and hopefully issue NTP sometime late Q3, early Q4 of 2021. And with that, unless there's any questions, we can go and move into some of the easement and budget discussions.
Thank you, Stefan. Mr. Chairman, members, good morning. I've got about 5 slides here, and I would invite questions, interruptions. I want us to have a discussion about our path forward on the cost of this project. We have obviously a goal of how much money we should spend, and we are beginning to see what cuts can be made. We have a list of candidate cuts where we're changing scope, and I think some tough decisions lie ahead, but we'll get to that. First, I wanted to talk about the value of the easements that we've secured from Nova Parks, and remind everyone that this is really an exchange.
Dale, I'm so
Yes.
sorry. Mr. Sultan has his hand
Oh,
up for a few
okay.
seconds.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
I just have one minor question. I noticed in the schedule, there's no additional public events or public meetings shown. Is that something that's under consideration?
Yeah, it's something we're still, I mean, I think I might have to turn it over to Carla and Mark to discuss this, but I mean, we have some small money allocations possibly for, preparing that, but yeah, I think that's something we still need to determine.
Yeah, that's something we
Okay.
need to consider.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, thank you, Marty. That's great observation. Thank you.
Can I piggyback on that real quick? When is the last time that we did a public outreach? Is that like 2 years ago, something like that?
I'd have to defer to Mark, Mr. Campbell. I mean, we did the stakeholder workshops, but there was also the, the county process where the crew teams were there speaking about the park. That was probably about a year ago. Stefan, do I have that right? That would have been, I believe that's the last time, yeah.
That was, March of last year, so a year and a half now. So
Right.
You're talking about the statutory public hearings for the special exception?
Right.
Okay, but the open house that we did, the one that you had Jim's picture and stuff, wasn't that like 2 years ago or so, or 3? I can't remember how long ago that was.
Well, that particular one was actually 2015, one of the initial ones.
Oh, yeah.
What I would say, kind of the process has been, we took all that feedback and built that in to, a lot of what those guiding principles were. And then we've shared along the way a lot through a lot of different channels. We have connections through the local HOAs and sort of some of our social media stuff. We have different groups that we share information. We work with some of the supervisors, particularly Tony Buffington, whose district that's in their newsletter, and we've had a lot of time to share that. But when we went through the special exception process, we had said that was another opportunity that we were really sharing the information. So there's been a number of different channels, but to I think what you're getting at is when is the last time we've had a big in-person type meeting, and that's been a while since we've done that. We've just used other channels to sort of share information and updates.
Okay.
Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I didn't realize it was 5 years ago that we did that. Time goes by so fast.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm with Marty. I think it'd be good to, as we're looking forward with the critical path and stuff, I think it'd be beneficial to have some additional outreach, especially to the immediate community, Broadlands, Brambleton, Martins Chase, all of those adjacent HOAs.
We can do that. I mean, one of the things that we want to do is get people excited about it, so now as we sort of narrow in on that time frame and that schedule, I think we have a good story to tell. So thanks for that feedback.
This is Angeline. So I agree with Mr. Campbell. In fact, Campbell, thank you for bringing that up, Brent. You touched on something that I was going to talk about as well. It's just one of my high points as well. So yeah, Carla, if we can discuss that at a later date and time, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Back to the exchange. Easements, which are valuable to Loudon Water in exchange for the use of Beaver Dam and the putting funds towards the construction of Reservoir Park. And the idea was these easements that we needed from Nova Parks, the value of those easements would be invested in our community. And that's what's happening through our agreement and our partnership with Nova Parks. There's a list of easements here, and I want to talk about some of them because the value that Nova Parks put on these easements was $19.3 million. And their valuation was approached from their experience and monies that they had received for easements. For example, I think it's B3, maybe, the tunnel between Quarry A and B. Luck Companies paid $350,000 to Nova Parks for that tunnel easement, and it was a 25-year easement. And it expired a couple of years ago, and Loudon Water needed to take it over as we completed construction, began construction of Quarry A, the milestone quarry that we have. That's an example. Another is the tunnel easement that goes all the way from the Quarry Luck complex down to and into Fairfax County. And that is a tunnel easement that could be used in the future for resiliency to convey raw water stored in the quarries down to Corvallis treatment plant owned by Fairfax Water. That valuation was based on a utility easement that Nova Parks had sold to another utility along the bike trail. So there was a basis for their number of $19.3 million. And as you probably know, we cannot condemn property that is owned by a political subdivision of the state like Nova Parks in a position to negotiate. But those are just a couple of examples of how Nova Parks arrived at that valuation. We choked on it, frankly. It was way too much money, and we negotiated that down. One of the things that I'll point out is that about half of the $19.3 million is for this future tunnel project, which may or may not happen. If it does happen, it'll be 20, 30 years from now. But the other half, that's for easements that we're using. And some of those easements have already been used. Some will be used in the coming years in the short term. And one thing that's very important, that the engineering staff at Loudon Water tells me that the cooperative atmosphere now with Nova Parks, that we're partnering with them, has really provided a much smoother, quicker, less expensive path for crossings of the W&O&D trail, because we do have to get permits to cross their trail for water and sewer lines. And I think we've secured one, and we're in the process of securing another since we entered into this agreement. So that half of 19.3, call it $9.6 million, is for easements that we're using now. I won't go into any more detail, but we do have more detail on the easements if you'd like that. Can you give me the next slide, please, Stefan? So I want to talk about cost estimates. This is a typical process. You know, we had a planning number of $10 million that we're working with. When we began looking at the park in more detail, the cost estimator came up with this initial cost estimate of $12.6 million. And this is for construction. This isn't an all-in cost. So through the design development phase, which we have completed at 25% of design development, that number dropped to $11.5 million. And this is occurring in workshops where Nova Parks is providing a lot of input about how the park should function. And we're talking about the crew facility and how that should be laid out, the docks and where they should be on the property and on the shoreline. And a lot of more detail is coming forth to inform the cost estimate. And one of the things that happened in this phase was we took the wish list of the crew group and we called it down by saying, okay, we really can't do bathrooms in the crew buildings. There's a bathroom on the site that's planned, and there were some other HVAC and other features of their wish list in that building that we said we just can't do that. We have to save some money here. So it was that kind of process without changing the function of the park. We began to change the cost of the park, reduce it. And then from 25% to 100%, realizing we needed to get the number down, we made more cuts, and the lion's share of the savings there, and I know you have more detail on this that we sent out to you, but the plantings in the bioretention basin, that saved, reducing the planting saved $800,000. So it was things like that were done. And now we're through the design development phase, and the cost estimate is $9.8 million. It's still too high because that's just construction. So we have other things we're looking at. The other thing I'll mention here is that some costs went up during this phase. For example, the cost to bring in Loudon Water fire protection was something that wasn't contemplated at the earlier estimate phases, but in the end, that was a decision that was made. It's not locked in stone, but that seemed to be the appropriate thing to do, and that added $400,000 to the project budget. So some costs went down, some went up, and this is just typical. You all know this. So we have two more estimates coming, as Stefan mentioned, and those will be informed by more detail. We have some, as I mentioned earlier, some candidates for cutting and changing the scope. Some of those are more painful than others, but we can also try to economize and reduce cost as we get into more details in the actual construction documents. That last estimate, of course, will be made on the same documents that contractors will be bidding on. So that's an important cost estimate for us. So next slide, please, Stefan. So here's where we are, cost overview. Top line allocated, that's for the special exception process, the design services, and the cost estimating services. You have $100,000 in that number for cost estimating, and you've hired a specialty firm to do that. They're a local firm, so they are familiar with cost in our area. And cost estimating, as we know, is a profession, and people make a career out of cost estimating. So there's one thing I'm going to say here, which I think we all need to keep in mind when we throw out numbers early in a project. When you're working with a planning level number, it can be as much as 25% low or 35% high. These are numbers that we deal with, and that's just based on not having enough information to know exactly how much something is going to cost. There you see the current estimate for the construction cost after design development, 5% contingency. Then you have CA services. This is something that you will want to negotiate with your firm. I look at CA services as preventive medicine. I think you can pay to make sure you get quality work and that the design is fully executed by your contractor in construction. And you can also manage your change orders much more effectively if you're active in your CA efforts. So with that number added, you're now looking at a total project cost of almost $12 million. So there's a long way to go to get down to $10 million. It's $2 million. So we then add the contribution by Nova Parks to the project of $2.5 million. There's the easements granted, and the total Loudon Water contribution at this point in the project is about $9.5 million. Now, again, that value number, Nova Parks put a value of $9.6 million on the easements that we are going to be using in the near term. Those numbers are pretty close by chance. That just worked out that way. Any questions at this point? Any hands up?
Yeah, you got a couple, Dale. You have Mr. Campbell first, and then Mr. Allen, and then Mr. Kobelis. Mr. Campbell, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, you're right.
That's
Thank you.
okay.
Dale, how much of that design, permitting, and cost estimating, that 1.3 million, how much have we spent to date? Do you have any idea?
I think.
I can.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm adjusting slides accidentally. So right now to date, we have spent about 67%, so $875 or so thousand of that.
Okay. All right. Okay. And that includes what? All the engineering, all the architecture, all of that.
Yeah, all the permitting, architecture, special exception.
Okay, and 100K of that 1.3 is for CCI doing the cost estimating?
Yes.
Okay. And how much have we spent to date on CCI? Like maybe half of that, you think?
A third of it.
Third of it?
Yeah.
Okay. About 30K. What's the advantage of having CCI versus whatever civil engineer we end up using to do this, having them do the estimates?
The firms we have currently under contract to design, none of them have specialty cost estimating services. You know, we reached out to them and asked them if they felt comfortable doing this level of cost estimating, and they said they didn't have the services in-house, and initially we're going to contract them out regardless. So we felt it was better in order to get a more accurate estimate to go to the firm that actually does this, pretty much as their job. So
yeah. So Dewberry's on retainer with us, right?
For this, I think as a BOA they are not involved with this project.
Correct, right. But like a Dewberry or a Bowman or somebody like that, you don't think that they'd be able to do cost estimating here?
I mean, I don't think saying they can't isn't a right assumption, but I just think we're going to get a more accurate cost by using someone this is their specialty. I know we've used Dewberry for some of our BOA task orders, and they've done cost estimates, but we've had varying levels of success, I guess so to say, with those estimates.
Sure.
So.
Sure. Okay. And do we have a civil engineer engaged on this project, or just at the moment it's just the architects?
Right now we have Bowman engaged. They're the ones working us through the site plan process.
Okay. Okay, great. I'll let some of the others here ask their questions.
Mr. Allen?
Yeah, thank you. This is for Dale or Carla. Where did the original $10 million number come from?
That's a very good question. And I'm not sure that I have the answer, but among 3 or 4 of us, we probably have the answer. We first started talking with Nova Parks about this exchange, and the natural question arose: well, what is this park going to be? We had a master plan at that time, and we asked the designer, and they threw out this number. At that time, I was thinking that was a construction number. So I admit I didn't put a whole lot of thought into it, but it became a number that was in our minds, in our discussions with Nova Parks, and then it kind of followed with the project as we went forward. To answer a little bit more in a little more detail, the way we arrived at the $2.5 million contribution from Nova Parks was we were in a meeting trying to hammer this out, and Carla simply asked, as I recall, Carla, not to throw you under the bus, you asked Nova Parks how much money they had and how much money they could allocate to this project. And we were discussing loaning money to Nova Parks to provide the additional funds needed, things of that nature. And that's when the exchange idea came up. They said they had $2.5 million that they had cobbled together from different sources within their budget to put into this project. That's my recollection of events. I don't know, Carla, Mark, if you have any more to add, I'd appreciate it.
Oh, I have a lot more to add. I'll let Carla.
That's the wrong Mark.
Oh. I'll let Carla go first.
But your chair, you're allowed to speak. So I don't have a lot more to add to that. I think, and Dale, you have more of that history than I do, but I think it goes back to remembering why we stepped in to do this to begin with, and the estimates maybe that Nova Parks was getting for, a typical park. So I'm not sure, but yes, they committed to the 20% of design and construction up to $2.5 million. So that's where we landed. It was never formally adopted by the board as a formal spending limit. I mean, we do things a little bit differently, that we come back to you every year for budget numbers and capital spending plans. So we're able to refine our numbers, different than the county. When they go forward, they appropriate money well in advance. And then that carries through. This is a little bit different. Mr. Mark.
Which one?
Well, I'm calling you Mr., so must be you.
So I was making some random notes while we were talking, so these statements are going to be kind of random. First of all, this is to Brent. We, as an MEP firm, we can do cost estimates also, but we always prefer, and which is the same thing with Bowman and Dewberry, we always prefer to go into an independent cost estimate because they're really got the hands on the pulse of the current costs. We basically, most of us and all engineering firms just use the cost guides, and they're always up and down. So it's always better to go to an independent cost estimate. If you remember in the beginning here, we didn't even have any cost estimates on this job in our contracts, and the board asked Carla to get some cost estimating done, and that's when we started doing cost estimating. Back in the days when we started with this thing, just for, I don't know who was actually there, I know I was, I mean, $10 million was absolutely extraordinary for this project, and almost all the board members at the time were just about fainted. But what was important to us, and I think that actually Dale, who I respect tremendously, understated what the value of the easements were. I remember there was a lot greater detail of how much those easements were really worth to us in the future. And I'm not talking about in the next 5 years. I'm talking about in the next 50 to 100 years. And if I remember, it was a number more like $20 to $30 million of value of those easements. So again, those were just statements I was writing down as quickly as I could while you guys were talking. So my hand up was up just to find out that, I guess this is to Stefan, since he's kind of in charge of the architect, is this $1.3 million going to hold as the final cost, or are the architect going to add a bunch of numbers? Because I can see right away, if we're going to start asking for meetings with the public, that number is going to go up about $50,000 every meeting. So I'm just curious if that is a good number. I see that your design, you say, is 60% of the cost, but we still have a 50% construction documents and then 100% construction documents. So I'm just wondering, is that $1.3 million true, or is this going to go up and up and up and up?
So as of now, we're tracking pretty decently. I mean, all of our consultants know that that's what we have allocated is the limit. We have the task order broken out very specifically, so I can track it essentially to each subtask, and I can see where they're spending money at. So as of now, I'm expecting it to hold. Obviously, if a wrench gets thrown in the plan, things might change. But with the current outlook, I don't expect us to go over that allocation.
How much have we spent on that 1.3 million? And does that include all the things we had to provide for the county? Is that the only cost that we've spent for this out of this budget is to the architect?
So the 1.3 million includes a special exception process.
Oh yeah, okay. That's what I want to make sure.
Yeah, it includes the design and bidding task order, which is a big chunk of it. It also includes the 100,000 in cost estimating and some preliminary items that were needed for the special exception. So right now, yeah, we're at about 2/3 of that money spent. So 875,000. If we want to look dig a little deeper, if we're just looking at the engineering and architecture costs, we're about 60% spent. So that's tracking pretty well with where we are in the design, seeing that we still have construction documents and permitting to go.
All right, thanks. That's all.
Okay.
I have to fix myself now that I can see myself. To fix my shirt. All right, now I look better.
Mr. Bonfils and then Mr. Sultan have questions.
Marty, please go ahead and I'll go after.
I just wanted a clarification on the $2.5 million. I thought that I heard somebody say that their contribution will be 20% of the design and construction up to a maximum of $2,500,000. Is that correct? It's not in other words, it's not a stated amount, it's a percentage?
I believe in the agreement it's a percentage. Stefan, is that, I just looked at it recently. I think it's 20% of the design and construction up to 2.5 million, which was based on that 10 million estimate, because they've already paid us 500,000 upon award of the contract. Stefan, is that your recollection?
I believe so. I'd have to go and check to confirm.
I'll confirm.
Yeah, Carl, I think you're right. I think the initial 500,000 was the 500,000, and then the additional 2 million was along the lines what you're saying. It was a 20% up to the 2 million.
10 million. Right. So the 500,000 is already in hand. That was set, and then 20% of total design and construction up to the 2 million, because
Correct.
the 500,000 has already been paid.
Okay, thanks. I was just curious.
Sure. Mr. Bonfils, yes.
Yes. I appreciate all the comments, and this is a very open forum, and we want to keep it that way. My recollection, Mark, was when we talked about the 10 million. That was our portion, and then in addition was Nova Parks. I think that some of the early estimates that we had were low. I've been involved with quite a number of park constructions here in the county, and our estimates are always in the early phases low. And lately they've come in, when you get to construction, really low. As many of you have been following, say, Lovettsville Park, what has happened over the 20 years of the planning of that park. So we need to be very careful about that. We got into this to get our Loudon Water message designed, imprinted as part of the park. If you go down to, and I've been a regatta director at down on the Occoquan, and you hardly know that by the layout of the park or anything, except for signs that you can't swim in the water and no gas powered engines are allowed, that's a drinking water reservoir. So I think that what we're doing here is very important, and we really don't want to be penny wise and pound foolish. So that's my 2 cents, and we'll get back to the presentation.
Next slide, Stefan. Actually, let's go back one if you would, please.
I think control may have been lost during the hiccup. There we go.
back to the easement map. I did want to make one more point. I guess I can make it without the map up there. This tunnel easement is really for water resiliency, as I described it. And if that project moves forward, you'll be able to recover that investment because others will pay for that project. Loudoun Water will participate to secure our water capacity from Fairfax Water, but others will participate. I think this committee certainly has an opportunity to learn more about this in your coming meetings. And there is work being done by the region to secure additional raw water capacity. ICPRB recently completed the update of their reliability study. That's something else you may want to hear from them on. And the pursuit of the Travilla Quarry in Maryland has got some secret legs going on. So there is activity. I think that will shine more light on this tunnel project. And I think between Fairfax Water and Loudoun Water, there certainly would be an opportunity to pursue that project as the additional quarries come online. First one scheduled, Quarry B, in 2035. So just a little update on all that. And I appreciate Mark for your comments that maybe I understated the value and the importance of that easement. Okay, with that, any hands up? Let's move ahead, Stefan. And let's go to the next slide. I mentioned earlier that we're looking at a cut list. We're at $9.8 million, $11.9 million right now. And we've identified about $500,000 worth of scope changes, and I'll talk about those in a little more detail. These are changes that I think we have tentative agreement with Nova Parks on, and we've removed one of the small pavilions, reconfigured the area of boat rental and the dock there. We removed a bridge that was really one of Loudoun Water's kind of features for part of our education program, and we've set aside an area for parking that we would not asphalt and just be kind of spillover parking and turf. And I'll talk about those on a map just in a second, because I want to start talking about how these things affect stakeholders. Everything else that we've identified has a serious impact on some of the stakeholders, and Nova Parks does not agree with these additional scope changes. So those are not well vetted yet, but the point here is that we're digging for more savings and trying to figure out, by changing scope, what can we cut from the project and the cost estimate. In my kind of judgment at this point, we need to hit some home runs. Little nickel and dime things are not going to save $2 million. So we need to pursue those, but we need some big changes if we're going to get this this total cost down to a spending limit of $10 million. I see Mark has his hand up.
Yeah, just real quick. At one time, and I don't remember, I don't have the specifics, but at one time, we had a certain size boat building that we were going to provide to Nova Parks, and they doubled a certain size that we were going to give them per our agreement, and then they doubled the size of it. And then I heard there was some discussion about maybe possibly going back to the size we originally did, or what that was, but I don't believe we have reduced the size of that building at all and have not looked at it since we talked.
I think what you're referring to is, in our agreement, it spells out things that could be considered in the event that we can't get to a number that we're comfortable with. And so there's a minimum size building spelled out in the agreement. It's not half of what is there now. I'm going to say it's.
Carl, I think it was like you're saying, there was a minimum square footage, which I believe was 6,000 square feet.
Right. And there's certain
and
we can't take off the table. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I think the current size of it is about 8,500. Stefan, correct me if I'm wrong. So there's a minimum of 6,000. It's about 8,500. And that is one of the key things that at this point in the process, Nova Parks, is really, really pushing to keep it where it is.
And this is one of the things that's under the bullet additional items. So it is on the list because we're seriously looking for any area where we can save money. But again, this is Nova Parks. One of their key stakeholders is the crew teams and the crew clubs, and I can't speak for them, but I know that they felt like they've kind of maneuvered away from what the crew clubs wanted, which was bathrooms and heated space and air conditioned space in their crew building, and all that's been modified to reduce costs. So again, can't speak for them, but I think they feel like they've sort of done what they can to save money on that particular item. Another one there that they don't agree with is removing one of the docks. The crew facility has 2 docks, one for the crew boats and one for the instructors and the safety boats. So there's another potential savings, but they don't agree with that. They want those 2 docks so that facility functions the way it should. Again, can't speak for them, but those are the kinds of discussions that are going on. If I could, though, any more hands up? Move
Not
to
right
the
now.
next slide, please, Stefan. So this is a little hard to see, but this refers back to the cut list that was in the first half of the previous slide. And over to the far right at the lower area there, that's where the bridge was. And that bridge was going to go over to a little gathering area. There was some ideas that we would have a teaching tool there. That bridge also would take visitors to the more remote and natural part of Beaver Dam Reservoir. That's the southern or the upstream area. And that's where perhaps the bridge would be an inviting entrance to that area for the bird watchers and those that just wanted to get away and reconnect or do the things that we do in nature. So that now is a pier. It was located there because of all the places in this park, there's 2 on the extreme ends of the arc where you have a long view down the reservoir. But you can still get out on that pier and see down the reservoir. So that was an $85,000 savings, as I recall, to replace the bridge with a pier. The other is the boat rental, which is in the lower center, and that used to be a U-shaped dock. I think the idea there was that you may have people trying to launch a rental boat while someone is trying to launch their private kayak, and it would be easier and more helpful for them to have 2 basic docks to work with, and now it's 1. I don't recall the savings in that, but obviously the geometry of the dock being straight and not U-shaped is going to be cheaper to construct, and there's less work and material involved. Over on the far left is where the small pavilion was removed, and this just gives you an idea of the changes that were made to try to save money. I believe, I'm not certain, that Nova Parks will be renting some of these pavilions, and so part of their interest is to have a source of income. So on the additional cut list, the second half of the previous slide, we're looking at more cuts, and there could be the removal of a large pavilion, another small pavilion. At any rate, we've looked at enough scope changes to get the estimated cost down to $10 million. So that's where we are. I think what this project needs is some input from the board on whether or not you want to go down this path, or whether or not you want to think about the process that we're in of cost estimating, let it carry out. Because if we're going to make these big scope changes, we got to do it really, really soon as we go into the final design of this project. So not to hurry anyone or be pressured, but these are tough decisions that we have to consider if we want to get this cost below or to $10 million. Right now, I would say right now, I would say we're at 11.9 minus about 500,000. So we're about $11.5 million if we make the changes that are shown on this slide.
Dale, Mr. Kobelis has his hand up.
Yeah, just real quick, Dale, with the way that the construction prices are going right now, they're actually coming back down again. So rather than eliminating them, I think I would recommend more just put in a lot of add alternates so that we can make the decision later.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that, Mark.
Okay.
We can certainly do that. One of the options.
Yeah, if I can jump in real quick, for items such as like removal of a pavilion and possible paving of the the back portion of the parking lot, I think that'd be a pretty simple option to do. But when we're talking about things such as reconfigurations of boat rental area or changing the bridge to a pier, I think the add alternate's a little bit tougher, because then when you're looking at the designing of those things, you sort of have to design two scenarios and have them bid out two different alternatives. There's something that I think keep in mind as we're thinking about possible options.
I'm real concerned about making major changes, like some of the ones that are listed on there, because it takes away from the Loudon Water signature of the park, and anything that it takes away from revenue generation for Nova Parks, who has to run this park. We don't want to be in the business of running a park. Those are two key things to me. So it may end up costing us more than the.
I think one of the things to, the finance person in me has the voice in the back going, the investment we make now, we know based on the numbers that we're looking at, that we're getting that back and then some. And the reality is some of those easements, we could also be getting money from other utilities who may benefit from some of those easements. And so down the line, we may be recouping the investment in this park as well. We're getting the value for sure in the easements. But down the line, over time, we could also be recouping it through payments from other utilities who are going to benefit from those easements as well. So just to keep that out there, it's a great exchange, it's a great partnership, and it's a real benefit for Loudon Water. And just to piggyback on Stefan's comments, I mean that's sort of where we are right now. Anything past the cuts that we've made, with the exception of a few things that we will definitely consider as bid alternates, we have to know what we're moving forward with in design, and if we can move forward. And again, the items that are left on the table are reduction in scope, they have been brought up to Nova Parks. I mean, they're a partner in this. We're trying to understand, their point of view as well. So we just have to keep all of those things in mind. But from staff's perspective, it's really direction. That's what we're looking for. Mr. Campbell.
Hi, thank you. Couple questions. So we got $250,000 for rock in there. Is that based on what we think we might encounter? Obviously, there's a lot of rock there, but in terms of the excavation or digging, is that just for the water lines, sewer lines to serve the bathrooms?
I think it's water sewer. Also, I mean, there might be some for the building bases. I think for that initial estimate, that was just an allocation because we know there is a lot of rock right here. We got the geotech reports in, so I think the next estimate is going to have a much more refined rock number.
Okay.
I'm not sure where that will go up or down, but as of now, that was more of a placeholder.
But in terms of the buildings we're building, I mean, we're not really excavating. This is all slab on grade stuff, right?
Yeah, correct. I mean, there might be an excavation for like the bioretention areas, minimal, but they're not going deep for anything.
Right. Okay. Great. And then we've got $63,000 in the budget for harvesting stone boulders on site. Is that really necessary?
The idea with that was to make more of boundaries areas near the water line, just to keep people sort of where we want them to go. Now I think we can talk with the engineer and architect to see if there's other alternatives, but we thought that would be a good way to utilize the existing site and some of the natural features to help sort of keep people where we want them, and you're not really allowing them to veer off in certain areas of the park.
Sure. If we're looking at areas to save cost, if we could, you guys said it's $85K to change this pedestrian bridge to a dead end here, but if we had to pick between the two, I'd rather skip the boulders and leave the bridge personally. But is there any reason that we couldn't have Nelson Bird Waltz go ahead and hand this off to Bowman to finish this up?
I think there's still quite a bit of work to do on their end as far as landscaping, hardscaping, and actual material selections. While we have the buildings in place and the layouts, there's not really much other detail to them. Same with the planting areas. I guess it's not impossible, but at the same time, I think there's some major considerations to be had if we're talking about that.
Well, and Nelson Bird Waltz is obviously in development circles, the general public doesn't know Nelson Bird Waltz, but they're a high-priced, well-known firm, and Bowman's a lot cheaper. And so at this point, I wonder if that's not an area that we could also save another couple $100,000. Let Bowman help us with some of those final things. They've got architects and so forth there as well. So that's why I was asking the question.
Well, I think it's important to note that Bowman is a sub to Nelson Bird Waltz, correct, Stefan?
Yes.
We don't have a direct contract with Bowman. And going forward, a lot of the work that's left is Bowman's responsibility with the permitting and the site plan process. So again, Nelson Bird Waltz, in parallel to that effort, would be finishing up the design.
Sure.
Yeah. I guess just to interject, right now we have $350,000 remaining in the design task order. About 130 of that is MBW and 100 is Bowman's. So, while the switch might save money, I still think I don't think we're going to get to where we need to be by doing that change.
Mr. Allen has a question.
Mr. Campbell, were you done with your questions?
Yeah, sure. Well, I might have more, but Terry, go ahead.
Okay. When we go out there next Thursday, are we going to be able to get down to where this bridge is that we're contemplating getting rid of so that we can kind of conceptualize that view? I can't remember how accessible the site is. And then also, we're going to be able to get over to where the pavilion is, the one that we're omitting, and see that site. Does anyone know the answer?
This pavilion to
Go
the
ahead.
north, plan left, yeah, that should be pretty easy to get to. Just going down Alfred Road, it's pretty flat. I believe there's a trail that runs, existing trail that runs along the shoreline here to go here. As you can see, the elevation is a little steeper in this area. I don't think it's impossible. But
There is a trail there.
Okay, so yeah, we should be able to get to this area then.
So Stefan, make sure you get me down there, okay? Put it on your notepad. And then
I'll get you down there.
you
I'm
might
gonna
have
get
to,
back up though.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
you leave me there. And then we're saving 800,000 on plantings. Do you have any idea of? It seems like a lot. I mean, did we originally have 500 plantings and we're going to 200 plantings? Do you have any idea how much of that is, what the count is, in other words?
Yeah. Well, I don't really have an idea about the count. So the main driver of that saving was when we initially priced it at 25% design development, we didn't have an idea of what type of or what size bioretention and the exact amount of bioretention areas we'd have. So we put quite a conservative number in there in the estimate just to cover our bases so that our costs wouldn't increase. As Bowman went through that site plan process and actually narrowed down and did the calculations how much bioretention we need, we found out it was quite a bit less than what we had allocated the first cost estimate. That was a big chunk of that number.
I just didn't want to make sure that it was going to be dark. Like they weren't putting any plantings in. It was just going to be.
Oh no, there's still a decent amount of plantings, just
Okay.
not what we thought for the bioretention areas.
Right. Well, that's good news then.
Yes.
All right. That's all I have.
I'll piggyback off of Terry there. So just so we're clear, the budget I'm looking at, we've got currently $1,034,000 for plants. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
And 577,000 of that is for the bioretention with excavation.
That sounds correct. I can confirm.
Okay, and then that rock contingency that we got of $250,000 is in addition to this 577 for bioretention and excavation.
Yeah.
So this excavation number doesn't include any rock. They're just assuming that we don't run into rock.
I think this number, the 577, would assume, say, easy, just dirt, and then we have the 250,000 that might be allocated down to like the 577 number, the next estimate, once they evaluate the geotech reports.
Yeah.
And that might be distributed around to other excavations and line items as well.
Because that rock contingency also includes the water and sewer that we're bringing in.
Yeah, it's just a very generic placeholder at this point in time. It's tough to really evaluate what rock we're going to be running into where when they didn't have the geotech.
Sure, and that's fair. On the rock stuff, I mean, I think the only thing we can do from a design standpoint is just try to keep things shallow and not go deep. And it sounds like we're doing that with the buildings.
Same in this area. There's a lot, as you can see on the plan. There's a lot of boulders and rock. We're going to do our best to avoid them and sort of weave through it, but we're expecting to be doing rock removal there at some point.
Yeah, I mean, when we were building homes in Brambleton and Willisford, I mean, we just hit rock constantly when we were doing basements and stuff. So it just is what it is. But help me understand this concrete. We got a $270,000 number for a concrete seat or check dam that's under exterior improvements.
Yep. So a lot of the pavilions, I don't have it on this presentation. So each pavilion will have essentially like a 2.5 foot high concrete wall that's forms the boundary of the pavilion where people can sit down. Also, going down this main swale, as you can see here, we have several check dams. They're sort of hard to see, just to help create ponds and stuff. So that's what that number will be allocated to.
Okay. And then we've got permeable pavers with a steel edge. I haven't looked at the geotech on this, but I know the geotechs from the surrounding areas. I mean, I'm assuming this is a lot of clays here. Are permeable pavers useful here if we've got clays and soils of that nature, expansive clays, things like that?
Well, I think the thing driving permeable pavers is we have that 200-foot buffer that runs right through the middle of the site where we're required to use impervious material.
Even if we've got impervious clay directly underneath?
That's something we can talk to the county about, and I have to talk to our civil engineer. But yeah, I mean, as of now, the requirement and our expectation is that we have to use permeable materials through a portion of this main arc.
Okay.
Do that buffer.
Well, and I don't know what the savings would be switching from permeable pavers to just normal pavers. You know, it might not be that significant, but you know, there's a lot of perched water tables and other things around here with the clays and the soils, and so it may be worth a discussion because it defeats the whole purpose if the water's not able to permeate through the soil.
Absolutely, yeah, I can ask that question for sure.
Okay, great. Another thing, you know, this, as I mentioned previously, this area is in the bike shed for the metro station, and the FTA and the federal government has numerous grants for the development of pedestrian facilities and bike facilities within these metro areas. And so I wonder if that's something that we could spend a little time looking into to see if there's some funds that we could tap into that would help offset some of the cost of these improvements.
I'm not aware of those things, but I think that is going to be a good topic as we talk about agenda for our next meeting and trail in particular. So I have taken note of that and look into it.
Yeah, Kimley Horn was hired by the county to do this study around the metro, and so I have it somewhere. Maybe I can send it to you, and you can send it out to the group or something. But you know, there's a study there, and then there's a bunch of material and policy that encourages these pedestrian and bike facilities within these metro areas. They want people to be able to get around these metro areas without getting in the car. That's the whole idea behind you know, this significant capital that we've invested in metro. So anyhow, it's something worth looking into.
Right. And I think, you know, we're restrained by what we can do in the park, and we're doing some things in order, you know, to get people there, finishing one of the connection points. You know, this is more the destination, and we can control what we do within that footprint. You know, we are working with the county to see how Loudon Water fits into that bigger picture, and you know, what role we can play in helping solve some of those things. We can't be the solution, but we can certainly be part of it. And so that's why we want to hopefully devote the next meeting, a lot of the next meeting, to talking about how we fit into that bigger picture.
When you say that we can't be the solution, but we can be part of it, what are you referring to? I don't understand.
Outside of this footprint of the park. I mean, this is what we can control, which is what's inside the park. Spending money outside of the park for things that aren't related to our mission is not something we can do, but we can figure out how we can play a role in that to get people to the park without driving. You know, we're going to do our part within this footprint that we can control, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, yeah, and I appreciate that, and maybe I wasn't clear either. The grant funds that I'm referring to would be monies that we could tap into for improvements on the land that we own between Nova Parks. I'm not suggesting that we're trying to find funds for off-site improvements.
Right. Okay. No, I appreciate that. Thank you. We'll look into that.
Yep.
Are there any more questions before Dale moves on? No. No hands, Dale. You're on mute now.
I was
There.
muted. Yeah, next slide. So another thing that, and Mark, I was very interested in. It's good news that construction costs seem to be coming down. We'll be looking at other projects, and maybe this is something that Nova Parks will be able to help us with, other bids, other things that are happening. This is an example of the Lovettsville District Park. This is ball fields primarily and trails. It is 90 acres. I believe our site is more like 70, 75, so it's larger and it is different. We have more structures. They have ball fields, which I would think entails a lot of grading. But their bids came in at a little over $11 million for this park. But just an example of benchmarking. I understand the design services for this facility was right around $800,000, $790,000, I believe. So anyway, this is something that you do for almost all of your projects to understand the bid climate and the construction industry's view of bidding at the time you go to bid. So downstream, a year from now, when you're ready to bid, then this kind of information might be helpful. And I don't see any questions. Stefan, it's back to you.
All right, and as one of the last things to talk about is just how we plan on coming to this committee moving forward. Ahead of you can see the schedule I presented earlier. So we'll just go ahead and walk through some of our interactions or potential interactions with this committee on the project. Obviously today we did a overview and budget discussion. We have another meeting scheduled for the end of the month. I think a big item on that will be the trail discussion, but there are also some other items we're looking to discuss relating to the architecture, the buildings and shelters that we get some feedback on. That will work into the design. I think the third meeting is right now scheduled for mid-October. Again, there's some more architectural items that we'd look to present and get feedback on, finishes, some more exterior features of the buildings. From there, take a holiday break in December. In January, look to have Sue give an education overview of where we're at in that process. Come to you in February, hopefully with that updated cost estimate, just to present that, see where we're at, and do a quick design check-in. I see Mr. Campbell, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just quick question. What's the education overview that you referenced Sue would do in January? Help me understand that.
So right now she's working with her consultant that I'm currently forgetting the name of. They're working through some, potential. I see Sue has her hand up. I'll let her go.
Thanks, Stefan. Yeah, so obviously, as you know, the education piece is embedded throughout this whole design process. We talked about the butterfly roof and the check dams, but there are also other pieces that our subcontractor, Riggs Ward, will be working on for us. Relief maps, monument signage, those colors, branding. So we'll have an opportunity to weigh in on some of those things in January.
Okay, so it's kind of like the little education thing that we've got at the main office there with the, like, we got what do we call it with the sewer? We got the whole in the
apiary.
Thank you, the apiary. But we got like fish and just so it's displays and things of that nature.
It is. I mean, as I said before, the education program is really embedded in the design. But yes, to your point, there will be some interpretive exhibits, signage, bench infographics, and things like that. So really an extension of our apiary program. We've been referring to it as kind of a living lab. So those are the things that we'll be able to weigh in on.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So just working through this again. In April, we'll possibly look to bring you, an overview of the permits, another design check-in, see where we're at, and then meeting at June. By that point, hopefully we'll have all the design completed. Look to have the final cost estimate that we could present. to the board, and that'll be right before we go to bid for the project. And with that, we have a tentative agenda for next month's meeting. As I mentioned before, look to do some discussions on the architecture, and then also discussions about the trail networks. Any questions?
Yeah, I'll mention, last meeting, Marty referenced, what was it, Marty? The Potomac Peddlers?
Yeah, the Potomac Peddlers are a huge local biking group. I think it's the biggest one in the area.
Yeah, how do we get them involved and hear from them?
So,
I can, go ahead.
I can contact some of the people that I know there. Or yeah, I tell you
So
what, I can get you the information. So you can deal with them if you haven't already.
Right. So at our next meeting, we're going to have representatives from the County Trails Initiative, which has a couple of different names. It's an initiative I've been involved with for more than 5 years. There are many constituents about trails use for bikes, for road bikes, for BMX bikes, for equestrian, and they've all come together in that that initiative that the last board gave to Parks and Rec and the Park Board. So we'll get a lot of that information from the representatives from the county when they come from Parks and Rec to come next at the next meeting, and let's then from there let's talk about how we want to engage which different groups, because this is a much bigger initiative than just our park. But we want to see how we fit into that initiative.
No, that's great. And so the county trails folks, Jim, they'll be giving us a presentation at the next meeting.
It's my understanding that Steve Torpy has accepted to come to the meeting and do that briefing.
He has.
And he'll probably bring one or two of his other folks. If not, there's a lot, and we may want to choose a representative to be on that working group also. I think it's an important step forward, and that's only 2 weeks away. So before we call out anybody else and talk about setting up some meetings, let's get the overview from Steve Torpy, Director of Parks and Rec.
Sounds good.
So with respect to the agenda for our next meeting in 2 weeks, we've hit on the last bullet there, which is the Trails Initiative. And again, Steve Torpy will be meeting. Starting at the top there, confirmation of elements on critical path. We'll come prepared with some elements that we just need confirmation that we can move forward, and they are on that critical path that Stefan highlighted. Also, if you'll recall, back in April, staff was formally directed by the board to have Nelson Berg Waltz do some renderings that incorporated traditional elements onto the current design. And to date, we haven't done anything with those. And so from staff's perspective, we kind of need to check the box on that either way. That was a formal directive from the board to do that. And so we can bring that back to you, and you can give us feedback on those elements. A lot of those things are also things that could be bid alternates, stone, those kind of things. But we do want to make sure that that effort is not lost. And again, then we would have the trails. I think the trails are going to be the biggest portion of that meeting. But again, we have some critical path elements, and then the traditional elements, work effort, and get your feedback on that.
It sounds like a pretty full meeting.
It does. Mr. Sakar has her hand up. Mr. Bonfils.
Hi, I just had a question. I think I know this, but I will still ask. is somebody taking meeting minutes for this meeting?
Yes, Jewel is on our meetings. We do not record meeting minutes verbatim. Committee meetings are more summaries. But they are, all meetings are recorded, if that answers your question.
Okay,
But Jewel is
okay.
always in the meeting. Yeah.
Okay, the reason why I asked that is because with this meeting too, you know, a lot has been discussed and, you know, I just want to make sure that the action items are captured so that, you know, I have a copy of that. So next time when I come to the meeting, I'll come more well-informed. Carla, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell.
Yes, do we have an idea of what Nelson Bird Waltz would charge to do these additional renderings?
They're already done. They were done in preparation for the June meeting that was, and the agenda item was pulled. So, or was it the June meeting? I think.
I'm sorry. I thought you were just asking for direction as to these additional renderings.
No. Yeah. So if we go back in time a little bit, pre-pandemic, at the March meeting, there was a resolution that staff have Nelson Bird Waltz prepare some, I guess renderings is the right word, but they were basically take the current design and incorporate some traditional elements into that. Or softening elements, I guess we should say. So either vertical or horizontal orientation of the wood and wood or metal roof, things like that. And they did that. And we were prepared to bring that back to the board for action, for a vote. And then the pandemic hit and well, the item was originally pulled from the agenda and then the pandemic hit and we weren't able to bring that forward. So that's still outstanding for us. It's an effort that's done to know what to do with it. We'd still like your feedback on those elements to see if we should consider those as bid alternates and or, in fact, one of them, Stefan, correct me if I'm wrong, the roof structure, whether it's, I can't remember the names of the beams. It's either Lulum or something. Anyway, that has to be decided as part of the critical path. So we'll have a couple of those elements, but that's the effort I was talking about, Mr. Campbell. That effort has already been done, and the cost of that, Stefan, 20.
That was 20,000.
Okay, but so the money's already been spent, and we just need you guys need direction from us as to what elevations you want.
Right.
Want to go.
Right.
Okay, that's fair.
Right.
That's fair. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Allen.
Thank you. So I'm assuming before that meeting, we're going to get, I think there's 16 different renderings, if I'm not mistaken, that Nelson Bird Waltz redesigned, and they had different water tables. They had different ways of supporting the roof. So are we just going to review those 16 prior to our next meeting and then kind of talk about them?
Yeah, so I think, you know, I haven't thought it through completely, but my original thought would be to include in this meeting presentation, the presentation that we had prepared and we're going to bring forward, which included those renderings, you know, those choices. And then, yes, then we would ask for your feedback on those. So it's something you've seen before. It was in a board package. And again, the item was pulled. So it's nothing new. You've seen them all before.
Yeah,
I
don't know if everybody's seen them though. So
right. All right. Well, they were all in a board package, but again, we will resend that so it's fresh in your mind. It'll go as part of the package for your next meeting, definitely.
Carl, I believe we sent it out in a survey online as well prior to that when we were going to share that at the June board meeting. So we can pull all that back together.
We'll just send everything that we had sent before.
Send it all.
Send it all
It'll
and
with the,
check the box.
All right.
it'll go out with the agenda.
Mr. Bontos?
Are there any other questions? Do we have a feel for how many people are going to show up on the 22nd for the tour? I'll be there.
Jewel, I think you have firm confirmation on 3. Is that correct?
As of yesterday afternoon, that's correct.
I'll be there. I don't know if I confirmed or not, but
I believe you did. But I can go back and send something out just to remind folks.
Yeah, please do
To
that. I
accept.
think it's an important tour. I'm sure it'll be a nice fall day, a nice fall morning.
Of course.
Of course.
And we will, those that are attending, we're going to reach out to you, to probably a day or two before, just to talk about where to meet, where to park, the specifics.
Yeah, and since it's not under construction, we don't have to wear our steel-toed shoes, right?
That's correct. But you might want to wear your hiking boots if you're going to go off the beaten path.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Mr.
What about
Bontos,
masks?
Dale has his hand up. Dale?
What about masks for that meeting?
Yes, if you can socially distance, you should wear your mask.
Well said. Dale?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman and members, thank you for your comments. I want to try to capture our path forward on the question. The feedback that I kind of absorbed, but that helped me because everybody needs to understand where we're headed, is that we'll move forward with identifying bid alternates, and we'll move forward with those elements that are on the cut list that don't lend themselves to being bid alternates without a whole lot of design effort. And we're going to have to decide, I think, what can be bid alternates and what cannot, and share that information. And that's where I'm hearing we're going, but we do need to give direction to the team to get started and have a clear path forward. So having said that, I'll ask, is that where we are? Is that confirmed?
Well, that is what I heard from the committee today. Without objection, are there any objections to them to the staff moving forward with Dale's summary?
So this is Marty. I agree with that approach.
And this is Brent. Just so I'm clear, so we're moving ahead with striking those elements, or they're staying in? I'm not clear of that.
Oh.
Those elements that can be bid alternates will be kept in that manner. But we'll have to look carefully at how much effort has to go into designing 2 alternatives as we go into this next phase. So I think that's the homework for staff, to try to figure out what remains on a cut list and what goes on to a bid alternate list.
Okay. Yeah, because some of the things that were proposed as possible things that could be removed or cost savings, some of those things I'd personally, just myself, I'd like to see stay in the plan, but maybe we can discuss that at a future meeting.
All right. Is that clear, Dale?
It is for me. I think that coming out of that process, we will be making some decisions, and I appreciate Brent, you wanting to maybe consider putting things in like the bridge, for example, and I think those things can be considered. I think clarity and making decisions over the next couple of weeks is really important to moving this project forward in an effective and efficient way, so that we're effective with our budget. I'll think.
Well, I think what our direction is that using the current budget environment, we may actually be over that 10 million. and we'll have to go back to the board to discuss that. But the, we don't want to be penny wise and pound foolish.
Well, and I'm reading between the lines here, but I think that while we have been considering the $10 million of spending limit, we now see that it's going to be very difficult to get there without some very tough choices.
True.
And I'm hearing you want to defer some of those choices with the bid alternate approach, and maybe take a real hard look at the cut list. My personal approach would be to not move forward with a cut unless we have agreement with our partner, Nova Parks.
Correct.
And a good discussion with them about that particular element that we're considering cutting. But I feel like the team has done a fairly good job at this point in time in trying to figure out what this park is going to cost, while keeping the interest of stakeholders forefront in our mind. Because we do want to, I want everybody who had input into this park to look at it after it's constructed and see success. And we all define success a little bit differently, but for me, I want to see the smiles on the faces of the stakeholders, and including Nova Parks and our elected officials. So that's my little speech. And I think it's money well spent to get there as best we can, but in a frugal and efficient way. So
that's right. But the folks at that meeting 5 years ago that wanted to have a zip line and a rope swing into the water are going to be disappointed because we're not doing that.
Right.
Out of scope. So with that, please proceed. And I'm looking forward to our next two meetings, the tour and then the meeting on the 29th. Please interest in this committee and everybody joining. I don't think we have any other business before the committee. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn. This is Brent.
I'll second that. This is Angeline.
I'm sorry, we need a committee member, Mr. Sakar, but thank you.
I'll second. This is
Any discussions? Hearing none, you take the roll call vote.
Mr. Bonfils,
Yes.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Sultan.
yes.
Thank you. Adjourned at 9:38 a.m.
Thanks everyone for the time. It was a long meeting. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.